Good morning and welcome to SUNUP. I'm Dave Deacon and we're talking wheat varieties this morning. David, let's look back at the 2016 wheat crop. What was the big winner in wheat varieties?
So if we look at, we have a number of varieties that we've had planted at a lot of our locations across the state. And this year we have 17 different locations reported. And of those 17 different locations where we had the varieties planted at those locations, the top variety this year was actually Bentley.
Wow.
And followed closely by some other varieties such as WB Grainfield, TAM 204, actually Gallagher and Iba. So again, Bentley came out on top, but the WB Grainfield was a close second, and we're talking about a 5 bushel spread here, from about 68 bushel to 63 bushel within those top 5 varieties.
What made Bentley such a great variety this last year?
Well, I think just the overall weather conditions. We had conditions this year at critical times where we had more ideal temperatures as well as plentiful moisture. We had, especially during grain fill, where we had a little bit more lower than normal temperatures, but plenty of moisture during that time, and that just led to more ideal conditions for favoring kernel filling.
Now moving into the 2017 crop, what are some of the better varieties producers should be looking at?
Well, fortunately, based on a lot of our variety trial results, there's actually a number of different varieties that producers can plant. And looking at some of our other variety trial locations where we have different regional trials where we have all the varieties that are entered into the trial. So we have 4 different locations spread across the state. And some of the varieties that also did well in those areas, in addition to those 5 that I just mentioned, were Joe and Larry and Tatanka out of Kansas, LCS Chrome, and Cy Flint and Cy Monument. So again, a lot of different options that performed well in terms of the grain side that our producers can plant for this coming year.
No, and a couple of those names that you mentioned there are actually white varieties.
The one is Joe. Joe is actually a hard white variety out of Kansas, and yeah, again, our regional trial locations are spread across the state, but we think more of, and it did well across those, but we think more of a hard white wheat production in Oklahoma, kind of, at least at the present moment, more focused around that kind of that Enid area. And another variety that wasn't at all the locations, but is from Oklahoma State, is Stardust. And it was at the Lahoma trial, and this year it did do pretty well overall, but it was outshadowed just a little bit by some of those other varieties in terms of yield production.
Now, moving forward into 2017, some producers may be thinking, I'm going to start with the intention of grain and then possibly switch to grazing. What should producers be thinking about whenever they select a variety for that?
Well, I think coming into this year, there's going to be a lot of attention paid to the cattle side here, and a lot of trying to get a lot of full forage production out. So I think producers are going to be thinking about varieties that are going to come out of the ground quickly, do well early on in September here, and produce a lot of fall forage, as well as produce a lot of forage in the spring. So producers are going to be looking for a variety that, again, is going to be good in that dual purpose type system, but also, and one of those characteristics is one that is going to be later to first hollow stem, or that time where if you are in that dual purpose, is going to be one where it's got a few more days where we can graze those cattle before we need to pull them off before we start reducing our yield levels.
Back in 2016 on the crop, there were some issues with disease pressure. Can you talk about some of the varieties that faced that?
So yeah, this past year, like the 2015, like last year, the biggest disease was stripe rust, and we saw that was the one that was pretty well widespread throughout the state. And some of the varieties that we do have varieties that don't have the best disease resistance for that for that pathogen. One of them is a variety such as like a Ruby Lee. But then we do have other varieties that do perform very well even when that pathogen is present, because it has good disease resistance, such as like a Billings. But if you were out there and you were out there scouting and trying to get a fungicide application put on at the right time for a variety like a Ruby Lee, it definitely paid for itself and helped protected a lot of that yield potential that Ruby Lee does have when we were able to try and manage it.
Okay, thank you much. David Marburger, small grain specialist here at Oklahoma State University. And for more information about what we talked about, visit our website, sunup.okstate.edu.
There's a new kind of research being done in animal science, and particularly in the beef cattle area. It's called fetal programming. And I thought we'd discuss that a little bit on today's Cow-Calf Corner. What do we mean by fetal programming? What we're talking about is the impact that different kinds and amounts of nutrition going into the mother cow while she's pregnant, how it may impact the performance of that calf after it's born. And quite frankly, out of all the research that's being done in this area, I still think there's a lot more questions out there than there are answers. One of the areas that I think, though, that we're getting a little better understanding of fetal programming taking place is in the area of immune status of these calves. Research recently done and published from South Dakota State University took a look at cows that were given different levels of nutrition during the middle third of gestation. They took half the cows and fed them to stay in a good body condition of about 5 to 5.5. The other half were cut in their nutrition to 80% of maintenance during that 3-month period in the middle third of gestation. Then they followed those calves after they were born as they went on to the feedlot. They found no difference in the calves in terms of birth weight, growth and performance during the feedlot, feed efficiency. But when they challenged those calves with a foreign protein, such as they might get if they had a disease entity that was meeting up with those calves, what they found was that the calves born to those cows that stayed in good body condition throughout that middle third had a higher antibody response to that foreign protein, which meant that their immune status was stronger. They were going to do a better job of responding to any kind of vaccination that might be given to them, as well as responding better to any disease challenge that might come along. So I think in terms of fetal programming, one of the areas that we do have a pretty good idea about is that the nutritional status of the mother cow during especially the middle part of gestation is going to have an effect on that baby calf's ability to stay healthy while it's going through the stalker phase, the feedlot phase, and on perhaps even into an adult cow if that's what it's going to be used for. I think that this is an area of interest you're going to read more about in the future, but I thought you might like to get a little bit of an understanding of what they're talking about when they mention fetal programming. Hey, we look forward to visiting with you again next week on SUNUP's Cow-Calf Corner.
If you spent some time fishing this summer, you may have reeled in a little something extra with your prize catch. SUNUP's Curtis Hare has more.
There's nothing like a tap on the line, a set of the hook, and the fight of reeling in a good fish.
Oh yeah, baby. Oh baby. Oh my gosh.
But while you're pulling in your prize, a fish might not be the only thing you've caught.
One of the most unpleasant things you can run into in the pleasant experience of fishing is wormy fish. Chances are, if you've been fishing very long in Oklahoma, you've seen the most common parasite perhaps that people notice in our fish, and that's the yellow grub.
The yellow grub is about the size and shape of a tic tac. and typically found in the fin, under the scales, or throughout the meat. Marley says the issue is extremely common in Oklahoma, especially in ponds.
It's a parasite that has 3 hosts. In addition to the fish, there are aquatic snails and fish-eating birds like cormorants or kingfishers or great blue herons. So that's where we get into what to do about it, and that is try to break the life cycle of the parasite by discouraging the snails, the fish-eating birds, but there's really nothing directly that you can put in the water to deworm the fish. It's not legal to kill the birds in this case, or in most cases, because they're protected by federal law, but we can take some steps to discourage them. If there are roosting areas where they are nesting, then perhaps those trees might be eliminated. Perhaps there's some scare techniques or other things that can be used to try to keep them away from the pond.
Although the yellow grub can understandably disgust or discourage someone from eating fish, there isn't a cause for concern if you ingest contaminated meat.
There's no known human health risk to the yellow grub. I assume you cook your fish, and most people do. Even if you didn't, there shouldn't be a human health problem.
There's one right there. There he is. That's a pig. That's a pig.
Hi, I'm Al Sutherland with your Mesonet Weather Report. August started off with rain in the Panhandle. For the first week in August, we would expect rain in other places in the state, not in the Panhandle. Our map of rainfall for the first 2 days of August shows some radar estimated rainfall rates that were over 2 inches, the darker green areas. The newest Mesonet site, Eva, recorded 83 hundredths of an inch. On our map of 30-day rainfall from July 4th through August 2nd, Minco collected an unexpected 8 and 66 hundredths inches. Nearby Oklahoma City East recorded 7 and 84 hundredths. For the month of July, the yellow and orange areas had more than 4 inches of rain. The dark green areas more than 3 inches of rain. The blue areas had less than an inch of rain. Sorry, Ardmore. Sorry, Durant. On a map of the percent of normal rainfall over the last 30 days, all that rain in central Oklahoma jumps out as bright blue, close to 200% of normal from July 4th through August 2nd. Bryan and Choctaw counties with Durant and Hugo had less than 20% of their normal July rainfall. That shows up in our soil moisture map of fractional water index at the 10-inch depth. The brown areas had between 1/10 to 3/10 fractional water index values. 0 is dry and 1 wet. Central and east central Oklahoma are dark green with excellent soil moisture at 10 inches. Hollis, Altus, and Tipton also had good soil moisture. That's unusual for them as we enter August. Dropping down to 24 inches, our fractional water index shows scattered dry areas in Oklahoma. From Hollis to Bernieville along the Red River, soils at 24 inches were wet, 7/10 to 1. Here's another unusual pattern in Oklahoma, a map through August 2nd with the number of days with highs of 100 or more has Hooker with 23 and Altus with 4. Granfield, our typical Oklahoma hot spot, was at 18. Kingfisher and Hollis had 19 days with an afternoon high of 100 or more degrees. Really? Altus had only 4 days above 100, and next door at Mangum only 3 this summer? Unusual for the beginning of August, but those numbers will surely rise as the month progresses. Even evapotranspiration, the inches of water plants use each day, had an unusual pattern on August 2nd. The highest water demand was at Granfield, 41 hundredths of an inch. Nearby Altus was only 26 hundredths. Up in north central Oklahoma in the dark green area, the plant water demand was less than 15 hundredths of an inch of water. As we start August, it looks like the heat has settled in. It also looks like we'll continue to see some unusual wet-dry conditions across our state. Thanks for joining us for this edition of the Mesonet Weather Report.
Corn harvesters are about to start rolling across Oklahoma, and it's turned out to be a pretty good crop. Kim, what are corn prices doing?
Well, you look at corn prices, they're in the tank, and they're in the tank because you've got corn ending stocks over 2 billion bushels. You got world stocks at 8.2. That's well above the 1.3 billion bushel U.S. average and the 6.8 world average ending stocks. You got production right now projected for the United States. Several firms have them over 15 billion bushels. You know, our last high was 14.5 billion. So we'll probably come out with high ending stocks and come out with high corn production. That's going to result in low corn prices. Right now, the market's bidding off the December contract for corn delivered wheat. Oklahoma between a minus 65 and a minus 60 cents per bushel under that Dece contract. Will it get you at about $2.70? Panhandle's the basis is a minus 30 cents, so that's going to get you around $3 and a nickel for harvest delivered corn.
Let's talk about another popular crop right now, sorghum. How are prices trailing there?
Well, you look at sorghum, of course, they're bid off that December contract too. In Oklahoma, the basis is a minus $1.10. You remember a few years ago when China was buying lots of sorghum, that basis was down around a minus 25, minus 30. So that gets your sorghum price for delivered sorghum about $2.25. The Panhandle doesn't like sorghum. As much as they do corn, so it's a minus 70 cents or about $2.65.
Let's talk about soybeans right quick.
Another record crop coming in, probably over 4 billion bushels. The last record was just below that. You look at what it's been offered in Oklahoma. The basis is about a minus 80 cents around the state, bidding off the November contract price at $9.60. So that'll get you about $8.80 a bushel for harvest delivered soybeans in the state.
Now, this last week there were some well-attended canola schools across Oklahoma. A lot of interest in canola. How does the price look?
Well, you look at canola prices, they've been coming down, but in canola you deliver at harvest and you sell at harvest. Right at harvest is $5.85 around most of the state. Right now it's down around $5.10, but that just goes year in and year out. You need to sell your canola at harvest as you deliver it in, because the elevators don't want to store canola. They need that space for other products.
Okay, now let's look into your patented Kim Anderson crystal ball here into the wheat 2017. What are you seeing?
Well, producers right now are deciding whether to plant wheat, some marginal acres. You look at that July 17 contract, it's about 70 cents premium over what we got right now. It's around $4.75. The basis that elevators are offering is a minus 95 cents, so it'll give you about $3.80 for 2017 delivered wheat. I think they've got at least a 20 cent, if not a 30 cent risk premium in that basis, so I'm looking, stick the old neck in the guillotine here, about $4.30 as we get to next year. That's about a 45 under basis rather than a 95 under basis, about 50 cents better.
And how does that compare to last year's crop at that time?
Well, if you look at last year, of course, we're about $1 higher. We had higher prices, and we had a higher expected price coming into this crop.
Okay, thank you much, Kim Anderson, grain marketing specialist here at Oklahoma State University.
These nutrition labels that are on the back of all foods that we buy are getting ready to change. And to tell us more about it is Darren Scott, a food scientist here at the Food and Ag Products Center. Darren, let's just kind of start in general talking about the reasons behind the redesigning of the food label.
Sure. FDA says that, the consumers that we have today aren't necessarily eating in the same way that they were approximately 20 years ago. And so these changes that you're going to see on the label are meant to reflect that, to give consumers better information, to maybe meet their dietary goals.
And so what can we expect to be different once the changes go into effect?
One of the things that you're going to see is the prominence of the calories information. That's going to be much larger, much easier to see. You won't have to fight, it's quite as hard to find it. Again, just trying to make sure that that information is available for your consumers to be able to see it easily. Additionally, you're going to probably see the absence of calories from fat. The current thinking is that, there are some fats that are good for you, and so you shouldn't be so concerned or afraid from the calories from fat, more concerned on, choosing products that have have good sources of fat, things from like nuts, fish, that sort of thing. You're going to see the addition of added sugars. That is going to be sugar that comes from, again, monodisaccharides, but also from concentrated fruit juices, concentrated vegetable juices, honey, or syrups. And again, if you're talking about this, for example, maybe a cookie, anything that you're adding to that, again, sugars, honeys, that's going to be considered added sugar. You're also going to see maybe the removal of a couple of nutrients. They're not going to be necessarily gone, but they're not necessarily mandatory anymore. And so those would be vitamin C and vitamin A. Current consumers can get those nutrients a lot easier than they used to be able to get them. Two nutrients that you will see that are going to be on the label now are going to be potassium and vitamin D. There are many studies that say that current consumers aren't getting enough of those nutrients. And so having those present makes it a little bit easier to be able to pick and choose the foods that have those two nutrients. And so again, those changes are hopefully going to give consumers a lot easier time of being able to pick out the nutrients that they need to meet their particular dietary goals.
So hopefully you don't have to have your reading glasses with you all the time when you're shopping if you're over age 40, right?
Exactly, that's exactly right.
When can we expect to see these labels in place in the grocery store?
Okay, for companies that earn more than $10 million annually in food sales, you're going to see those in 2018. For companies that earn less than $10 million annually in food sales, the deadline for them is going to be 2019.
Okay, Darren Scott, thanks a lot. And for more information on the new food nutrition labels, go to sunup.okstate.edu. How about a pistachio?
Sure, why not?
Okay, great.
Finally, we traveled to Kingfisher County to visit a family that has had their name on the same mailbox for over 3 generations.
When I come home and if I bring somebody from the city and I said, my dad grew up in a house on the other side of the house that we live in now, and this is the only address that he's known for 75 years, they're amazed.
This is where I grew up, been here all my life.
And all of Ruel's life only goes back 75 years. The Kinslows go back even further in Kingfisher County history.
My dad was born about a couple of miles north of here and back to the east. My mother, she was born down about 2 or 3 miles west of here, and then back down close to the river.
I really didn't know the history of our family up until a few years ago when I actually started working with Dad. I was a school counselor, and we were out during the summer, and I said I was going to be looking for something, and Dad was like, well, you can help me. So that was when I really started helping him out, and we would go to different places and check cattle, and he would tell me the story of how his dad had actually gotten this land or who used to live here. It was like my own history lesson and Black history lesson. So I enjoyed just riding with him during the days and checking the cattle and just hearing the different stories about the area.
The only times that he has left this address was to serve his country and shortly thereafter get a degree at Langston University. Otherwise, he was working the ground for a wheat or a mung bean crop, working beef cattle, or early on, working for his dad in the family dairy.
I used to hate that dairy, because twice a day, you know what you're going to do. You're going to milk cow twice a day. Morning, I milk before I went to school. I milk when I come home from school. Sometimes your spirit will lead you back to your home ground. And I actually believe it was, godly spirit that led me back here.
All 3 of his children are making their way back to the family land and helping out as they can. While thinking about their heritage, they're also thinking about the future of Winslow Farms.
My brothers and I have sat down and kind of talked about what it may look like in the future, how we're going to do this. And like Dad said, if it's something that we don't want to do, then, it's our choice. But I think we would like to keep it in the family as much as possible. Probably the problem will be, after we get old, what's going to happen. And I think that's the scary part, but it's nothing that we can worry about right now. We just have to say, okay, you know, this is what we're going to do in the next 10, 15, 20 years.
But if you think about it, what you've been doing your whole lifetime, whether subconsciously or not, is you've probably been trying to build a legacy for your kids and your grandkids as well. And so to give them the best chance of success in moving into that role, you got to give them that a little bit at a time, giving them some more responsibility, some more management decision-making power. And that's why succession planning really helps with the expected. And so your succession plan is also an important emergency procedure, so that if something unexpected happens, it doesn't have to disrupt the farm or ranch. It's certainly going to be personally devastating, but there's no reason that it has to result in the ranch, you know, coming apart.
But as I done got older and the kids done got grown, I just enjoy running around here looking at the cows. I use it as a hobby. It's a hobby to me.
Well, that does it for us this week on SUNUP. If there was something on the show that you'd like to learn more about, visit our website, sunup.okstate.edu. And while you're there, check out our social media. I'm Dave Deacon. Remember, Oklahoma agriculture starts at SUNUP.